Can you explain the obesity paradox? Let's take the general population. This is everybody in existence on planet Earth right now. The obesity paradox says that when you look at the general population and you take out a specific segment of that population, we'll use the example of chronic kidney disease. You can look at things like heart failure, coronary artery disease. You can even look at, elderly men in general. Okay, but let's do the obesity paradox as it relates to chronic kidney disease. Of the people that have chronic kidney disease, we'll separate them into groups. And again, this is not drawn to scale. This is just for illustrative purposes. So let's make 3 different groups. Group 1 is going to be people with BMI under 25. Group 2 is going to be people with BMI 25 to 29, which is overweight. And the third group is going to be people with a BMI greater than or equal to 30, which is obese. Now remember, BMI is a number that's derived from your height and weight. It does not take into account your actual body composition. So keep that in mind. People in this category who have an obese range BMI tend to live longer than these people and these people. In a lot of cases, it's actually the people with so-called normal BMI that live the shortest. You might say, why is it that if you're more obese, you live longer? Well, number one, it's not a simple statement like that. It's really in the context of specific chronic diseases, higher BMI portends longer survival. That's the obesity paradox. A paradox is something that defies expectation. So you would expect that the more obese you are, the shorter you would tend to live. It's really not an obesity paradox, it's a BMI paradox. So why would it be the case that individuals with higher BMI tend to live longer with CKD than those who are less obese? Well, there's a few reasons. So number one, this is about most chronic disease in general, but people with CKD are under a great degree of catabolic stress. So I've talked about this a lot in the context of testosterone. There's a balance in the body between muscle protein synthesis and muscle protein breakdown. When you have CKD, you have a variety of underlying inflammatory processes, secretion of various pro-inflammatory cytokines, IL-6, TNF-alpha. Basically, the rate at which you break down protein is greatly accelerated. So to the extent that everybody with CKD is under some degree of catabolic stress, the people with lower BMI are obviously under a much greater degree of catabolic stress. That's why their BMI is low. Because BMI, remember, doesn't take into account how much muscle you have or how much fat you have or the type of fat you have. It really just adds up all components of body composition. So people with lower BMI in the context of chronic disease tend to have much lower muscle mass. You have much lower muscle mass, that means you have this process is obviously running rampant in your body. So to the extent that lower BMI individuals live shorter with CKD than higher BMI individuals, probably has a lot to do with the underlying inflammatory state causing, a greater degree of protein breakdown. When you look at these individuals, though, the higher BMI individuals with CKD, they are handling it better. Why? Because they have more subcutaneous fat. Subcutaneous fat, when you have underlying metabolic derangements and chronic disease, sub-Q fat can be protective because sub-Q fat is like an endocrine organ. It secretes a lot of basically anti-inflammatory adipose cytokines and other factors which increase insulin sensitivity. So higher sub-Q fat is not necessarily bad. High visceral fat, meaning the fat that surrounds your internal organs, is very bad. Even if you have a lot of visceral fat, that's still a very low percentage of your overall, body mass total. So I just mentioned that to say that although a lot of these lower BMI individuals probably don't have a lot of sub-Q fat, they may have extremely high amounts of visceral fat. And visceral fat is very pro-inflammatory. So that's basically the reason why the BMI paradox exists. It exists because when you have a very serious chronic disease, if you have lower BMI, when you look at, thousands of patients and you stratify them by their different BMI ranges, the ones with lower BMI tend to lose a lot more muscle because they're not handling the underlying catabolic stress of the disease, as well as obviously the individuals with higher BMI. And then the second point is that the higher BMI individuals also have a higher degrees of sub-Q fat, and sub-Q fat has protective properties.